Can the future be genuinely predicted, or is it generally a hoax? See, there are many people who practice hoaxing on other people. They predict that in the following 1,000 years something will happen, in the following 500 years something will happen. But if we are to think correctly, in 500 years we won't be around here. We don't know if we'll be around here in the next 20 years, or the next 10 years, or the next year. We don't know if we'll ever be around, right? So, if we don't know whether we are around, anyone can actually make any stipulations, right? Any so-called premonitions about the future. But some people might ask, what about Nostradamus? Everything they predicted, well, it was invented, right? Or it was demonstrated as true, more or less. Now, if it comes to humans, we have managed to create complex things up till Nostradamus's life. If one is to think about it, well, our race, despite the ignorance and despite the internal struggles of most, if not all, individuals of this society, well, it still managed to create all sorts of things. Was it impossible for someone back in those times to believe that humans would create machines that could allow humans to fly? Most likely, yes. But the point is, the longing to achieve that still existed in all of us. And it existed in us for long since before Nostradamus, right? So, can the future actually be predicted? And is this some kind of mumbo jumbo? See, the way I classify things, the future can be predicted into, let's say, two ways. It can be predicted in the unconscious way, or let's call it by the unconscious way, and it can also be predicted in a more intimate way. Now, intimate doesn't mean sex or things like that. It just means that someone gets to know you far better than most likely you will ever think you know yourself. Now, the unconscious way, you see, there are a lot of people who can do that, but most of the time they do it unconsciously. And what this means is they have a latent, let's call it a psychic ability, right? They are just unconsciously doing it. They are connected somewhat to it, and they usually perceive the patterns in a, let's say, they don't do it consciously. If you ask them, there is no logic to that, right? It mostly happens to women. I'm not saying that men would be any lower, but usually women are more in tune with certain energies of this world. Patterns mean repetitiveness. They mean a cycle, right? Karma is also a cycle. If you look at ignorant people, they will always live in a cycle, right? Or a bunch of cycles that constantly repeat, right? They'll always do the same exact things. Even if 20 years pass, most likely they will be doing the same thing, right? Habits, call them whatever you want, right? There are people, especially the older folks, who, barricade themselves in the box of the mind. And, well, even 30 years later, you will see them having the same exact habits, right? Which aren't even theirs. They most likely took them from their parents or other people around. They used their own logic. They created certain cycles, and, well, apparently they struggle that they can't transcend them, but they still prove complacent enough to not try to change them. So, the unconscious way usually is best for the masses, right? Because the point is, if you look at the unconscious trends, right? Some people call this the evolution, right? There is always an evolution, but unfortunately people lost themselves to the idea of meaning. Evolution doesn't necessarily mean going towards something better. Evolution doesn't go to something better or something worse. Evolution means a change. Now, that change is basically, if you take it unconsciously, it is that which shaped the entire life in here, right? If you are to take, for example, dinosaurs, that have been smaller, that have been bigger, and certain animals became much, much smaller after the dinosaurs disappeared because they no longer needed those big shapes, right? So change doesn't mean necessarily becoming better. Usually predators become better because they need sharper tools, right? They need far more advanced tools to achieve, their objective, that of hunting. And if you look at the various predators that we have on our planet, you can see a whole lot of magnificence, right? We as humans have created submarines, which are a fairly, I can say, magnificent piece of technology. But all that technology is situated, for example, in a single being, right? Single being, for example, the shark, has the same technology as we have in a submarine. Obviously, the submarine is adjusted with sensors to simply detect certain things that interest us. But speaking about the shark, they are still basically a submarine, right? They have that hydrodynamic shape. They are basically nothing else but muscle, and they can, reach quite formidable speeds underwater, and they can resist at quite great depths. Now, at the same time, they are fitted with highly advanced sensors, which well fit their own needs, right? A submarine has survival-based needs, right? Like sensors to detect possible dangers. The same is for a shark, right? They can feel certain um noises, let's say, in the water, certain disturbances, but at the same time they can feel prey from far, far away, especially if it comes to blood. So, evolution means reaching a different stage, right? It's not necessarily something better or something worse. It so happens with, for example, game design or different softwares, right? The following versions or patches aren't necessarily much better than the previous. Now, when it comes to this evolution always happens unconsciously because creation is unconscious. If it were conscious, well, that means it would have had a subjective mind. And if it had a subjective mind, then it would have only created based on certain attachments, right? Because if you give godly powers to a human, let's say, if that human is unconscious, they will react to all the things they hate, right? Give, let's say, creational powers to a racist, and that which they hate, well, most likely they won't be any more part of creation, right? Their legacy will be discontinued. So, as evolution occurs, evolution always happens in the shape of patterns, and these patterns can easily be foreseen. They can also be calculated if you want to use the mind, but they can also be foreseen, right? They can be perceived through the intuition. Now, unconscious predictors, as I call them, certain people who are witches who can predict the future, tarot readers and the such, well, not the fake ones, but the ones who can actually read things. When they read for the masses, they usually present you the truth that it's a general reading, so it doesn't have to apply to everything. But if you follow them for a long time, certain such tarot readers, you will see that most of their predictions can actually come true. It doesn't necessarily have to become true, but there have been a lot of people who predicted things like the pandemic and different moves. They didn't necessarily have to know things, right? Some of them knew it intuitively. Intuition means bypassing the logic. That's why people who are highly intuitive, they don't make any sense because the mind and sense, well, sense is a meaning, right? And in order for a meaning to exist, it must be logical, right? You have to create a certain attachment, and afterwards, it can only function based on that logic. If you break that, well, meaning is gone. If you call a tree, well, it must be logical that anything similar will be called a tree, right? And then further classification is based on that logic. If a tree is no longer a tree, well, all the logic fails, and the mind is simply disappointed because it cannot sustain the meaning which it is so desperate about. So the problem with predicting for the masses is the same problem if you predict for a single individual. See, when it comes to unconscious predictions can only occur for people who are unconscious, right? For people who simply follow the they just follow the consequences of life, right? Whatever happens, they just flow, and they just react to things, and they just follow, right? They don't think for themselves, and they don't act on their own accord. They just follow the trends. So when such things happen, the point is it's truly easy to simply predict such things, right? That's how this world is also run. You can basically remember the idea of problem, reaction, solution, right? This society has been functioning on this principle for thousands of years. A problem is created, the masses react because they are unconscious and they are kept so. And then, there's always that Jesus or whatever kind of person or group of people who come with the so-called solution which was obviously known and worked towards all the time in secrecy, so that they appear as the savior, right? And people cling to them, and this is a good way to simply claim dominion over the masses, right? When it comes to the conscious way of perceiving things, well, this one can't fail in any points, and in order to achieve this, one needs to be truly in tune with a lot more types of energy. When it comes to reading for the masses and predicting their future, the point is that is easy because most of the people are ignorant, right? When it comes to a genius, when it comes to someone who's mad, for example, or mentally broken, you can't predict what they will do in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes, right? Because they are different from those who just follow and follow and follow, right? They don't have any sense of life, any sense of direction, they just follow blindly. So the point is, in such cases, that is the easiest thing to predict, right? Because it's always a repetitive cycle. When it comes to the conscious awareness, right? Some gurus, some people who are highly in tune with, the sensitivity of life, with different energies of this life. When you have such super advanced levels, you only need to watch someone or have them be around you, and, well, you'll feel a lot of things. Now, the gut can actually perceive such things, but it matters how much you are connected with it and how much you are taking that into account, right? Because there have been all those situations in which you basically have been around people, you felt quite strange or awkward around them, right? But you disregarded that because, well, you've been taught to simply disregard your own intuition because, it's bad, because intuition cannot be guessed, right? Intuition bypasses meaning. And the slaves of the mind, well, they can't read that because it bypasses the mind. It bypasses their fetish, right? They must have dominion, they must have control, and control can only exist through meaning, because where there is meaning, there is no control, right? You cannot control that which you don't know. You cannot control that which you don't have any meaning on, right? In the old times, in medieval times, when witchcraft was something truly powerful, not the superficial thing it is today, one of the most dangerous things that could happen is someone actually knowing your name. A lot of things can happen if someone knows your name. A lot of energy can be channeled specifically to you. It doesn't matter how many other people there are with your name. A lot of black magic can be done if someone knows your name, if someone knows your email, if someone knows something about you, maybe your address, or has a certain object which is imprinted with your energy. Now, for example, your most intimate pieces of clothing are the most dangerous to fall in the hands of those who want to use black magic against you. Obviously, this may sound like fucking voodoo magic, mambo, wumbo, or whatever you want to call it, but this thing can be truly real. Even an ignorant, if they spend enough energy, they can cause some harm. Now, they may not necessarily kill you like some people can, and, well, you may need to, if you want to truly harm someone, you may need to practice and raise a lot of energy even for weeks. But such a powerful attack, even by an ignorant, can actually cost you quite a bit. If it comes to more advanced people, well, some of them are sufficiently advanced to actually pull you out of your physical body. But we don't have time to speak about such things, right? So the point is, when you are more aware of things, you can just look at a certain person, and based on their karma, which is basically their past, and based on their basic behaviors, you can actually truly show their future. Now, if you look at their higher dimensions of life and their DNA and the such, a lot of the things in their life are in a way preordained to happen. Now, if something is preordained to happen, it doesn't mean that it still needs to happen. After all, there is free will, and if you choose to function by your own self, the point is, you can actually change and take full control of your own life. And things which are bound to happen more or less, they are bound to happen at an unconscious level. If you live at that unconscious level, they will always happen because you will always live in reaction. So the point is this prediction any good? Well, being capable of predicting the future can sound as a very cool thing, but at the same time, both of these things, the unconscious one and the more conscious one, both of these things are, well, in a way bad. Because the point is, if you predict the future to people, you won't make them more conscious, right? You'll just give their mind even more reasons to be ignorant, right? Because when you give them thoughts about the future, you'd now give them a new reason to worry about or to be happy about. And the point is, if you keep thinking with the mind on all sorts of distractions, you're missing the whole life that exists around you, right? That is basically ignorance. You're not knowledgeable of everything that is around. Not only that, but you simply can't care about it. This is how ignorance is, and this only leads to far more suffering. Ignorance leads to suffering, suffering leads to pain, and pain, well, leads to a need for distraction. Distractions can only exist where there is meaning, because distraction is a fake sense of control. And as I said, there is no such thing as control where there is no meaning, right? I mean, from the perspective of the mind. So all this being said, hopefully this video was introspective enough. You are appreciated. Take care. Ferin John Board signing out.